The Kansas City Chiefs knocked off the Denver Broncos, but there were some great highlights and insights from this game that I think are good, valuable takeaways to think about for this Denver Broncos team, and some concerning things that Kansas City did that are a little bit questionable. And when I first started watching this game, I watched it in its entirety. I thought for sure the Chiefs were just going to blow the Broncos out. But when you look at the score and you actually take a look at what they were doing, at one point in the beginning, Kansas City was up 27-0. In Denver, Russell Wilson had just thrown probably one of the worst pick sixes you'd seen, and then had been knocked off the tackling so that they just ran it back to the house. But what was surprisingly remarkable is Denver actually stuck it out. They hung in there and really did a good job to come back to this game. And for anybody who's a Denver Broncos fan who's been, really doubting the Russell Wilson trade, yeah, there's probably still some merit there. But what you did see was you saw Wilson really play his heart out, and you saw him really step it up, and you saw inklings of a team that can actually produce on the offensive side of the ball, where up until this point in the season, it really hasn't been much of anything. So I think there's a lot to kind of take away from this game and the reality that you saw. And let's just run through the box score and then talk about a few of the points. And obviously we'll talk about Russell Wilson's injury. That was pretty scary for me watching that in real time. But as far as the box score goes, so Kansas City 34, Broncos 28. But you really saw the Broncos coming back in the second half of that game. And what you saw here is Patrick Mahomes kind of had a rough afternoon, especially in that sort of second half of the game as the team adjusted and the defense adjusted. The Broncos got really put on their heels early on, but then Mahomes came back and threw 3 interceptions, and Denver capitalized on at least 2 of those interceptions. So it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Kansas City and the way that they played. And I'm not saying that Russell Wilson did everything that we had come to expect in the trade coming out the gate, but he certainly looked like he played a lot more. He ran the ball much more effectively up until his injury, of course. And there's some notes here on the injury, right? So some people are saying, hey, this is a major injury. I will say that he did look like he took a huge lump to his temple. Now, for anybody who knows anything about traumatic brain injuries and things like that, the temple is one of the most sensitive places in your cranium. It's where a lot of the bones come together in the skull of the human, and there's some really critical arteries behind that. So the fact that he had hit the ground so hard, and I believe it was Chris Jones that was pursuing him that came on top of him, and that he hit the turf and crashed like that, you got to be really, really careful with those kinds of things. And long term, it can be really frightening. So I hope he's okay, but you hate to see it. It's one of the most, awful things about the sport, but you can definitely respect that Russell Wilson came out and showed up today. He had a rough beginning to start, which is kind of ironic because the last few games they've been actually pretty good on script right out of the game, and then kind of fell off more towards the middle and end of the game. And in this game, he actually kind of went off script and started running and getting out of the pocket and doing what he did during the first kind of half of his tenure with Seattle. And you saw Wilson actually perform quite well. So I think this is a good game. It looks like Russell Wilson's okay, so that's really, really good news. If they can get their key players like Cortland Sutton back and healthy, there's some really good positives for the Denver side of things coming out of this game, assuming Wilson is okay and there's nothing major there. And hopefully that is the case. On the Kansas City side of the things, it's kind of shocking that they went up so aggressively, and then Mahomes had such kind of awful interceptions in the game. And, I've always kind of thought that Kansas City has this really powerful offense, and they have these really powerful abilities to kind of knock you with a 1-2 punch. But then for teams that can kind of not completely get knocked out in that initial part of the game, they can sometimes come back, and Kansas City has some weaknesses on their defense, and they can be exposed. And Mahomes can be he can be a turnover machine at points in his career. And so I think what we saw here was a bit of that sort of Mahomes trying to do a little too much, especially up so much in the game, and then the weaknesses of the defense coming to light with an offense that's been wobbly for the most of the season with the Denver Broncos. So Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content, and I will see you in the next one.